All right, so get this. Two countries, they're locked in this legal battle over land that's been disputed for like over a century.
Wow.
We're talking about Guyana and Venezuela.
Oh, wow.
And get this, the prize is 2/3 of Guyana's territory. Huge.
Yeah.
Including potentially massive oil reserves.
Oh, wow.
Talk about high stakes, right?
Yeah.
So you sent us this article from News Source Guyana, published December 9th, 2024.
Okay.
It's titled, Guyana Submits Reply to Venezuela's Counter Memorial in Border Case.
Wow.
It seems like things are heating up, and we're diving deep to figure out just what's going on.
That's a great topic.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is how this case hinges on a decision made way back in 1899.
Oh, wow.
That's when an international tribunal drew the boundary between Guyana, then known as British Guyana,
Right.
and Venezuela,
Okay.
with what's called the Arbitral Award.
Okay, so this 1899 Arbitral Award,
Yeah.
it's like the cornerstone of Guyana's claim, right?
Absolutely. For over 50 years, Venezuela accepted this boundary.
Okay.
But then, as Guyana was on the verge of independence in the 1960s, things took a dramatic turn.
Hold on. So right before Guyana gains independence, their neighbor decides to make a land grab.
That seems pretty convenient.
It certainly raises questions about motives.
Yeah.
Venezuela suddenly declared the 1899 award invalid.
Wow.
And laid claim to a huge swath of land that was about to become an independent nation.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the tension that created.
I can't even imagine. You're about to celebrate your freedom and boom.
Yeah.
A major territorial dispute lands right on your doorstep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This dispute has hung over Guyana ever since.
Wow.
Impacting their development and creating this constant uncertainty.
So how did they get from this tense standoff to actually landing in court?
Well, after decades of diplomatic efforts, things came to a head in 2018
Okay.
with the UN Secretary General's recommendation. Guyana took a bold step and filed a case with the International Court of Justice.
Or ICJ.
Okay.
This is the top court for resolving international disputes.
Wow.
Big leagues.
So Guyana's basically saying, hey, ICJ, let's settle this once and for all.
Right.
That 1899 deal.
Exactly.
It's legit, and this land is ours.
Precisely. They're asking the court to confirm the validity and binding nature of the 1899 Arbitral Award.
Okay.
They're saying we have the legal paperwork to prove this is our territory.
But I'm guessing Venezuela had something to say about that.
Yeah.
Did they just roll over and accept going to court?
Not quite.
Okay.
Venezuela tried to have the case dismissed, arguing the ICJ didn't have jurisdiction.
Oh, wow.
However, the ICJ rejected their objections.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The court issued an order for both countries to maintain the status quo.
Okay, break it down for me. What does status quo mean in this context?
Yeah.
And why is that a big deal?
The status quo order means no one makes any moves to change the situation on the ground while the case is being decided. Guyana keeps administering the disputed territory, and Venezuela can't try to take control.
Okay.
This move by the ICJ shows they're not taking Venezuela's claims lightly
Yeah,
and want to prevent any escalation while they carefully deliberate.
that makes sense. It's like the court saying, hold your horses, everyone.
Right.
Let's figure this out legally and peacefully.
Exactly.
So how does this recent article fit into all of this?
This article marks a key moment in the legal process.
Okay.
It tells us that Guyana has just submitted its final written argument, a detailed document formally responding to Venezuela's claims.
Okay.
This reply, officially called a counter memorial,
Right.
tackles Venezuela's specific points head on.
Okay, so we've got this back and forth of legal arguments being filed.
Yeah,
What happens next? Is it decision time?
not quite yet.
Okay.
Venezuela gets a chance to respond with its own final brief. Get this.
Yeah.
There will be actual oral hearings at the ICJ.
Oh,
That's where each side gets to present their case directly to the judges.
wow. So things are really coming to a head now.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to see why you said the stakes are so high for Guyana.
And it's not just about abstract legal principles or lines on a map.
Right.
We're talking about a huge area rich in natural resources,
Yeah.
including potentially vast offshore oil reserves
Wow.
and the livelihoods of countless people who live in that region.
It's mind-boggling to think that one legal decision could redraw the map
Right.
and impact the lives of so many.
Yeah.
But if Guyana seems so confident, what are their chances of actually winning this thing?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Maybe even a billion-dollar question, given what's at stake.
You got that right.
Yeah.
So what are the factors that might sway the ICJ one way or the other?
Well, the ICJ is known for being very thorough and careful in its deliberations.
Okay.
They'll consider historical treaties, maps,
Yeah.
and evidence of which country has effectively controlled and administered the territory. There's also a legal doctrine called uti possidetis juris.
Okay.
Essentially, the principle that newly independent states inherit the borders they had under colonial rule. This often favors Guyana's case, based on the 1899 award.
So the 1899 award seems pretty central here.
Yeah.
But are there any weaknesses in Guyana's position?
Of course, international law can be complex,
Right.
and there are always nuances.
Yeah.
Venezuela might argue that the 1899 tribunal was flawed,
Okay.
or that circumstances have changed significantly since then. They might try to lean on historical claims predating the colonial era.
Interesting.
It's a fascinating legal chess match.
It sounds like a real nail-biter.
Yeah.
This whole situation feels like one of those historical dramas where kingdoms are vying for territory. Except in this case, it's playing out in a courtroom instead of a battlefield.
You've got that right.
And while the legal arguments are crucial,
Yeah.
we also can't forget the human dimension. There are real people whose lives are directly affected by this dispute.
Absolutely.
And that's something we need to explore further. You brought up the human element.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder what would happen to the people living in this disputed territory
Right.
if the ICJ ruled in Venezuela's favor.
That's a critical question
Yeah.
with no easy answers.
Right.
The implications for those communities
Yeah.
could be huge.
Yeah.
Would they suddenly become Venezuelan citizens?
Right.
Would they be forced to relocate?
Wow.
The uncertainty and potential upheaval would be immense.
It's almost like their lives are hanging in the balance,
Absolutely.
waiting for this court to decide their fate.
And it highlights the profound impact international legal decisions can have on ordinary people.
Right.
We're not just talking about abstract boundaries. We're
Yeah.
talking about homes,
Right.
livelihoods,
Yeah.
and cultural identities.
Earlier, we touched on the potential economic implications, particularly the oil reserves.
Yeah.
What could a Venezuelan victory mean for Guyana's economic future?
If Venezuela gained control of that territory,
Yeah.
it would be a significant economic blow to Guyana.
Right.
Think about it. They could potentially lose access to vast oil resources
Wow.
that could fuel their development for years to come.
And wouldn't that also create tension over who has the right to extract and profit from those resources?
Definitely, it could lead to new disputes
Right.
over resource rights,
Yeah.
investment agreements, and environmental regulations.
Wow.
The ripple effects could be felt across various sectors of Guyana's economy.
So it's not just about losing land, it's about losing potential opportunities
Exactly.
for growth and prosperity.
The economic stakes are incredibly high for both countries.
Right.
And that adds another layer of complexity to this already tense situation.
Stepping back a bit, this whole situation makes me think about those historical maps where borders were constantly shifting and empires were vying for control.
It's a reminder that territorial disputes have been a recurring theme throughout history, often driven by a desire for resources, strategic advantage,
Yeah.
or simply national pride.
And even though we're in the 21st century, these issues clearly haven't disappeared.
Right. While we've developed international legal mechanisms like the ICJ
Yeah.
to try and resolve these disputes peacefully,
Right.
the underlying tensions and historical baggage can be hard to overcome.
Speaking of historical baggage, how do you think this case will impact the relationship between Guyana and Venezuela in the long run, regardless of who wins?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
This dispute has already strained relations between the two countries,
Right.
creating mistrust and animosity.
Yeah.
Even if the ICJ draws a clear line on the map,
Right.
the emotional scars and political fallout could linger for a long time.
It sounds like even with a legal resolution, there's
Yeah.
a lot of work to be done in terms of rebuilding trust and finding a way to coexist peacefully.
Absolutely. True diplomacy involves more than just resolving legal disputes.
Yeah.
It requires addressing the underlying political and social dynamics that fuel these conflicts in the first place.
That makes me wonder if there's any possibility of a compromise
Right.
or a shared solution,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't perfectly align with either country's current position.
There have been instances in other territorial disputes
Okay.
where countries have agreed to joint development of disputed areas
Okay.
or found creative ways to share resources.
Interesting.
It's not impossible, but it would require a significant shift in mindset
Yeah.
and a willingness to prioritize long-term cooperation over short-term gains.
So you're saying that even in this seemingly adversarial situation, there might be a glimmer of hope for a more collaborative approach?
It's certainly a possibility,
Yeah.
though it would require both countries to move beyond the zero-sum mentality that often drives these kinds of disputes.
It's interesting to consider how different cultural or political perspectives might influence a country's approach to conflict resolution. Some might be more inclined towards compromise, while others prioritize asserting their claims.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Cultural and historical context plays a significant role in shaping a country's foreign policy and approach to international relations.
Right.
What might seem like a reasonable compromise to one side could be perceived as a betrayal or a sign of weakness to the other.
So even if there's a legal victor in this case, the bigger challenge might be finding a way to move forward in a way that benefits both countries and the region as a whole.
Precisely, a sustainable solution requires not just a legal judgment, but a genuine effort to address the underlying political, economic, and social factors that contribute to the conflict.
You know, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexities of international relations.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's not just about laws and treaties. It's about understanding different perspectives, navigating historical legacies, and finding ways to build bridges even amidst disagreements.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And this case, with its high stakes and long history, provides a compelling example of how international law intersects with geopolitics, economics, and the lives of everyday people.
It's incredible how much we've unpacked just from this one article.
I know, right?
We've gone from a seemingly straightforward border dispute to uncovering this whole web of history, legal arguments, economic interests, and human impact.
It really highlights how interconnected the world is and how a case like this playing out in a courtroom can have ripple effects far beyond the countries directly involved.
Absolutely. It's given me a whole new perspective on international relations. So as we wrap up our deep dive, what are the key takeaways you think our listeners should walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that this case goes beyond legal arguments and historical claims. It's about people, their lives, their livelihoods, and their sense of belonging.
That's a powerful point. It's easy to get caught up in the technicalities of international law. But ultimately, this is about human beings and the impact these decisions have on their lives.
Exactly. And regardless of the ICJ's ruling, the real challenge will be for Guyana and Venezuela to find a way to coexist peacefully and build a more stable and prosperous future for their people.
It's a reminder that true diplomacy involves not just resolving disputes, but also fostering understanding and cooperation. Maybe, just maybe, this case could even become a catalyst for positive change in the region.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Perhaps this process, however contentious it is now, could eventually pave the way for dialogue and collaboration on other issues of shared concern, like regional development or environmental protection.
It's a hopeful thought. And one that I think we can all hold on to as we watch this case unfold.
Absolutely.
Who knows? Maybe this deep dive will have sparked an interest in international affairs for some of our listeners.
I hope so. It's a fascinating field, full of complexities and challenges, but also with the potential to make a real difference in the world.
Well, folks, there you have it, a deep dive into the Guyana-Venezuela border dispute that's taken us through centuries of history, legal battles, and the very human stories at the heart of it all. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on this case.
Okay.
And sharing updates as they develop.
Sounds good.
In the meantime, keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious.